Welcome to the latest episode of Plenty in 20, our learning sprints for leaders. This episode is called Emerging Leaders Developing the Future. As with all of our learning sprints, as with all of our Plenty in 20 episodes, this will be short, punchy. It's a high-level overview with plenty of tips and strategies. So the first thing to talk about is what exactly is an emerging leader? How do you identify an emerging leader in your team? And the first thing to say there is that we do not believe that leaders are born. We believe that leaders are made. Leaders are made, they're defined by the way they behave and not who they are. Having said that, you will have some people who can be in a role for a long time and not develop the traits or the behaviours of a leader. It's simply not an area that necessarily interests them. So what you're looking for is, regardless of how long they've been there, tenure has very little to do with leadership. Sometimes we appoint people to management roles, expect them to step up and become leaders because they've been there a long time or because they're good at the task. And the correlation between those things is poor. So we're looking for people who demonstrate the behaviours and traits of a leader, which is beyond digging into what those are, is beyond the focus of today, other than one very quick overview. And that overview is that you manage things, you lead people. So when we look at the people in our team, the ones who are highly organised, can control things, get things done in an organised and efficient way, they may make good managers. The ones who have a really positive impact on the people around them and the ones who conduct themselves in a really positive way, they're showing leadership traits. So you manage things, you lead people. A simple example of that could be someone going out of their way to check that a teammate is doing okay. Or it could be someone who's willing to speak up and call out something that they think isn't right, even though they're not in that formal leadership position. So when we are identifying emerging leaders with a view to deliberately developing them, we're not looking for people who have been there a long time. We're looking for people who behave like the leaders you want in the future. Another really good way to think about them is they, to a large degree, exemplify the culture that you would like to create in your workplace. They may not be exactly the same as the current culture, but maybe that's a culture that you're moving away from. The other one that I've mentioned there is the way they conduct themselves, and that's around accountability, that's insight, that's self-management, being able to see how they impact people and being able to modify and be responsible for that, and also their performance. So why should we develop emerging leaders? Well, there's a number of reasons, and the first one is about you as the manager. The role of a leader is to develop more leaders. So one of the best success measures of a leader's performance is, are they developing leaders around them? Are they helping other people grow into future leaders? And that shouldn't be threatening to you. As you develop more leaders, you become indispensable, because someone who is able to do that and willing to do that is a very valuable asset. It also prepares you for future roles. But it's not just about the future. It's also about what happens today. So as you create or as you develop emerging leaders, you create what we call leadership at all levels. It means that things in the team don't always rely upon the formal leader. It means the team provides some leadership within the team. And if you can start to embed this in the team, you'll discover not only are you developing emerging leaders, those people are then influencing people around them, and you start to see leadership behaviours emerge everywhere. And this doesn't become a battle of the wills. If you've got managers everywhere, it becomes a battle of the wills. If you've got leaders everywhere, you've got people taking responsibility for the workplace, for the performance, for the culture, for their own behaviour. And as a manager, you're not dealing with a whole bunch of often petty issues that people should be dealing with themselves. So what we need to do is separate the behaviours of a leader from the position of a manager. We want to see people who aren't in formal management positions behaving like leaders. That's a really encouraging sign. It says positive things about your leadership. It says positive things about your workplace culture. For the future leader, there's a whole lot in this as well. And we've just listed 3 aspects here of what it takes if you were to go out today and recruit someone to come into your organisation as a fairly entry-level leader. Say a team leader or a supervisor may have one person that they're responsible for, may have a small team of 2 or 3, maybe if it's slightly deep end, which we'll talk about a bit later, it might be 4 or 5. But that person coming in from outside, they need to learn 3 things about your organisation. They need to learn your industry and or product. Even if they're from the industry, they need to know the way you work in this industry. They need to learn your culture. And because it's an entry-level position, they need to learn leadership. It's unlikely you're going to attract someone into an entry-level position that's already in an entry-level leadership position somewhere else or more senior. Unlikely, but not impossible. So there's 3 things they have to learn. When you develop future leaders internally, what effectively you do, you can tick off that first one. They know your industry or product. If they've been with you 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, they know the way your organisation works. They know your specific product or service offering. They know the industry. But they also know your culture. So there's another tick. They understand the way you work and potentially the changes that you're trying to make to the culture, and potentially they've already been part of driving that change. And they also, if you've invested in them, if you've invested in deliberately helping them emerge as a leader, and I don't just mean financially, in fact, financially is the smallest part of this, then they understand leadership. They've already been practicing leadership. So you've got someone who's already ready for the role they're going into. For them, personally, there's a whole bunch of things, and I've just listed 3 here, but recognition and growth are really obvious. It's a reason to stay. If you've got someone who is clearly an emerging leader, they are going to get itchy feet if there's no opportunities internally. Best way to keep them is give them opportunities to grow. Best way to lose them? Give them opportunities to grow. Because sometimes if they grow and there's no opportunity internally, they go somewhere else. And you should take that as a positive. It doesn't feel it in the moment, but you're much better off to grow people and have them leave than have people leaving because there's no opportunity for growth. At least while they're there, you get value from them. There's a great saying, what's worse than training someone who leaves is not training someone who stays. Now, a bit of a caution for you as you look at your emerging leaders, you'll get to know them. If they've been with you a couple of years, you'll know what all their flaws are. And it's really easy to see those, and it's really easy to look at an external candidate and not see their flaws. The recruitment process is not very well designed to do that. They send in references and they send in a resume which tells you all the wonderful things about them. In interviews, it's quite a superficial situation. Obviously, there's ways to do them better, which again go beyond today. But often we don't see the flaws, but they still have them. Don't condemn your internal person because they're not perfect, because none of the options available to you are. The internal candidate, you know what you're getting, and you've prepared them. Now, one final thing before we get into a specific framework is check their motivation, because you may have someone with leadership potential that doesn't actually have leadership motivation. If you're going to invest time and potentially some money in developing this person using the framework I'll show you in a moment, then make sure they're committed. We're working with an organisation at the moment that to enter their Emerging Leaders program, which is structured, involves internal and external measures, they actually make a short application, and once they're chosen, they sign an agreement which outlines the commitment they're making to the program, but it also outlines the opportunity that will be given to them. And I'm a big believer that that's worth doing, because it's really easy for someone with lower motivation to let work get in the way of their growth as a leader, If that's going to happen, they're potentially not going to fulfill their potential, and you're better off to know now. So I'm going to share with you here some resources that you could use as either for yourself, for anyone in the team, or even potentially as part of the development process for emerging leaders. Now, when we look at the development framework in a moment, you will see that these could actually fit quite neatly under the 10%. And you'll understand that more when you go through the framework. So the first of them is this Plenty in 20 series. It's free. They will always be free. And when you sign up, as you know, you get a full 12 months worth. You get the back catalogue as well as everyone that's released for the remainder of the year. Fantastic way to give your emerging leader a little bit of insight into what's happening around leadership and some of the things they might deal with. There's also a structured program. There is a cost for that one, but you can use the code there to save $500. Now, with the Authentic Leadership, it's a series of 3-hour deeper dive workshops, 6 of them over a 6-month period, plus some individual coaching and various other self-paced resources. And a couple of other free resources that are available to you are our podcast. Some people love hearing these things. So Kiralee and I talk in the Culture Nerds about various leadership topics. And our blog, which has a series of articles, again, around those topics of leadership and culture. Wonderful ways for you to keep exposing yourself to the latest in leadership ideas, but also, topically for this Plenty in 20, great ways for you to reinforce some of the other learning components for your emerging leader. So let's get into those emerging components. So, a framework for you. The 70-20-10 development framework, and I think this is really good for learning in general and perfect for emerging leaders. And what it proposes is that instead of, you'll notice down the bottom there, the 10%, which is formal training, which is the sort of stuff we provide. Now, if I, as a professional provider of this stuff, tells you it should be 10%, I've obviously got a vested interest in you doing a lot of this stuff. So I'm actually telling you it's the least significant, not in terms of importance, but in terms of time component of this whole framework. So I've got a vested interest in telling you the opposite. What this framework suggests is that 70% of someone's development should be challenging assignments. And that's what we call this experiential. They learn it by doing it. And people only learn by doing if we debrief and make sure we extract the learning. More on that in a moment. 20% is developmental relationships or social. We'll dive into that. And 10% is formal training. Now, critically, 70-20-10 is not a sequence. The three components should interact and support each other and happen concurrently. We don't say, oh, we'll do the 10%, that's the foundation, then we'll do the, we do them all together. And if we do them all together, we get much better outcomes. And I'll show you ways that they can interact. So let's look at the 70. And the first thing I'd say is throwing people in the deep end really the best way to learn. And I'm going to say no. I think it's actually an excuse for lazy development processes. So when we throw people in the deep end, they might drown. That's the reality. What we believe is that you should throw people in the shallow end and then prod them towards the deep end as you teach them to swim. Why would we put someone in the deep end if they're not ready to swim? So potentially you've got someone who's a bit more advanced than that, so we throw them in the middle. But we throw them at a depth that fits their current capability, but then we don't allow them to become comfortable. We prod them towards the deep end as we provide them with development. Now, one of the best ways to do that is to help people step up before they need to. I worked with a client recently where one of their managers complained that their assistant didn't step up when they weren't on site. And my question was, how many opportunities do you give them to step up when you are on site? Because isn't that the best time for them to learn? When they're not on site, that's the deep end, sink or swim. When they are on site, that's the shallow to the middle. and they can try things, they can experiment, they can learn in a much safer environment because there's a backup, there's a safety net. Now, ultimately, do that for a little while and then they're ready for the deep end and ready to step up when the manager's not on site. So some ways you can do that are, it's almost entirely on the job. And this is the beauty of the experiential 70%. It doesn't have to be disruptive. They're already doing these things. Make sure that you go out of your way to debrief with them. Notice when they do stuff that works well and reinforce it. Notice when they struggle and coach them. Ask them questions about how they might do that differently, what they'd change next time, how they felt about the outcome. All those coaching questions, and there is a Plenty in 20 available on that you already have access to. Give them opportunities to step up. So formal is obviously acting in your role. That's a bit deep-endish, but maybe they're ready for it. And informal is saying, listen, I'm really busy. Can you help me out with this? Or could you just take this on for me? I work with one manager who's really good at saying to his people, look, I'm just going to be tied up for a while. Can you take this on for me? And they make sure they're then busy, so that person then has to step into that role. But they make them safe steps and mini steps that build confidence, that build skill, and prepare them for even bigger ones. Give people assignments and projects, things that you might be struggling with. Give them those things. When I say struggling with, I'm talking about time-wise. I'm talking about workload-wise. Give them things that they can work on and use those as opportunities, again, to debrief. How did that go? What did you learn? That's all part of making this a teaching process, not just dumping tasks that you don't have time to do on them. So make sure you prepare them, give them the information, give them the guidance to do it well, let them do it, and debrief. Experiential is really about micro-coaching. And micro-coaching is little moments. It's not sitting down with someone as a manager and trying to coach them in a 35-minute off-the-job discussion. It's little questions as you go. How did that go? What did you learn? What would you change? What would you do differently? Let's move on to the 20%, which is the social. Now, the social is all about, it's a more deliberate process. So on the job is not entirely accidental, but it's almost incidental. It occurs and we use the opportunity. The social is actually more deliberate. So I'm setting up someone to have some mentoring or coaching or a peer group. Quickly, the difference between those, mentoring's probably not you. It's probably someone who's really good at the thing they're trying to learn. It might be another leader. It might be someone who's dealt with situations and they spend a bit of time with them. Maybe they shadow them. Maybe they sit with them and have a couple of chats over a coffee and learn from them. Coaching is much more likely to be you as their manager, about setting goals, about giving feedback, etc., but off the job. It's probably more looking at their work as a whole rather than around individual tasks. So that individual internal coaching, as I say, is off the job and probably in bigger blocks of time. And about setting developmental goals and see how they're going against those. And peer groups could be setting people up with 2 or 3 people who face similar challenges. Potentially they're all emerging leaders and they get together and talk about the issues they're facing, the solutions they're trying, the things they're learning. And then the 10%. And this is the formal. This is the stuff we provide. These are the workshops, sending them off to training courses, having professional external coaching if that's part of the development you think they need. This is to develop the skills, the strategies, the thinking that aren't available internally. And that can be because there's no time to do it. It can be because as the leader, you don't necessarily have the experience or skill in the things that you're trying to teach them. Or it may be that training process is not a skill that exists internally and they need that external person. And external does come with some perceived authority. Now, I'm going to go backwards here and you're going to question me at first to experiential, the 70%. Because I believe the other part of experiential is giving people opportunities to practice what they've learned through the 10 and the 20, through the social and the formal. Why would we teach people things and then not give them the chance to practice them? We know managers are really serious about their people's learning when they call us before a course and say, hey, can we go through what my people will be learning from you? I'd really like to set up opportunities for them to use those things when they come back to the workplace, because I know that's how they'll embed them. And this takes me to that final point about how the three interact. I could have someone on the job working away, doing that incidental learning, the micro coaching. At the same time, I'm able to support them through maybe some coaching that I'm doing as their manager, and I'm helping them do better on the job, perhaps with mentoring with someone in the team who's more experienced. And I'm sending them off to learn new skills from the formal courses, which I encourage them to then come back and apply in that experiential way on the job by creating deliberate opportunities for them. So that's the 70-20-10 and the way they interact. A wonderful framework to develop emerging leaders. That's our Google. That's our Google code. We would love it if you would just quickly scan a couple of words. Make such a difference. Let people know how you felt about Plenty in 20 and how you feel about the real learning experience. Hope you took heaps from today. All the best developing your emerging leaders.